Hey everyone! Today we'll be talking about the Chaos Dwarfs. Whilst this faction hasn't made an appearance on the tabletop within Age of Sigmar, there has been some lore hints within recent releases, such as the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, and of course the recent DLC added to Total War Warhammer 3. Let's get you caught up on the Chaos Dwarf lore from the world that was, and the scraps of information we have about the faction eking out an existence within the mortal realms. Here we go! The Chaos Dwarves of the world that was went by few names. Within the Dwarven tongue, they were named the Dawizar, which translates literally into the Fire Dwarves. In their own language, they named themselves the Uzkul Drakzar, or the Sons of HASHUT, the dark god which the race worships. In the ancient days of the northward dwarf migration into the World Edge Mountains, there were a portion of eager dwarves which ventured eastwards, towards the plateau of Zorn Uzkul, otherwise referred to as the Great Skull Land. The party's greed for precious ores and gems led them ever eastward, until they reached the Mountains of Morn. As the party began to strip the region for its ore, the coming of chaos cut these dwarves off from the rest of their civilization. The swirling chaos energies and rampant chaos legions that roamed the landscape made it impossible for messengers to reach their holds within the Mountains of Morn, and eventually they were assumed to be dead. The holds must have fallen to the tides of chaos. However, in reality these hardy warriors were not killed. However, they had fallen to the mutating influence of chaos. These stubborn dwarves eventually felt corruption, becoming sick, cynical mockeries of their former kin, with some of them even mutating into the hideous bull centaurs. During this period, they would abandon their ancestral gods and cry out for their salvation. A dark, terrible voice would answer their pleas, the chaos deity known as HASHUT, the Father of Darkness. Following HASHUT's guidance, the Eastern Kingdom of Dwarves slowly became the Chaos Dwarves, and was solidified with the erection of the great citadel of Mingolzar Nagrund, better known as the Great City of Fire and Desolation. With it, a slave force is required to toil within the forges and mines. This leads to conflict and the eventual enslaving of the Orc and Goblin tribes of the Darklands and Mountains of Morn. Much time passes before any further information is known about the Chaos Dwarves. However, following the creation of the first Black Orcs, 150 years before the invention of the Imperial Calendar by Chaos Dwarf sorcerers, however, only 50 years later, these very orcs would lead a revolt through Zar Nagrund, before finally being driven back. Many of these orcs would survive and flee into the mountains. You would assume with a potential dip in labour force that the Chaos Dwarf smiths would enter a lull in production, but this was far from true. Soon after this, the first of the Chaos Dwarf warships would sit within the Bay of the Sea of Dread. These would soon begin patrolling the sea and the River of Ruin. However, access to the Sea of Chaos was still limited, which led to the expedition to create a great canal which would connect the Falls of Doom to the Chaos Sea. This expedition would of course cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of slaves in its creation. This wouldn't be the end of Chaos Dwarf invention and design. Soon, the Hammer of HASHUT, a massive test rocket which stood as large as any of the towers within the Great Citadel. Once fired though, the rocket malfunctions and shoots wildly off course, nearly crashing into Zar Nagrund itself. The rocket eventually lands in the distance, and in doing so creates a crater 700 yards wide on the site of a former goblin campground. No goblin survivors are found, and further experiments are moved into the Howling Wastes from this point onwards. It's a well-known fact amongst those that have knowledge of the Chaos Dwarf race that they are a cruel and evil kind, that they seem to hold all others with much contempt. They seek to exploit the resources of the old world, to improve their wealth and arms, and seek to have all races subservient to them. The race is dependent on a vast slave force to carry out their labours, which outnumber the Chaos Dwarves considerably. The race has found strengths and weaknesses for all of their slave races, and knows how to best utilise them to ensure productivity is not impacted. The race is obsessed with the use of foul magics, and force breeding to mutate creatures into new forms that they can find uses for, with the most successful of these being the creation of the Black Orc, which did of course give them a bit of trouble during their rebellion, which we previously mentioned. This experiment very nearly led to the destruction of the Chaos Dwarf realm, with the rebellion only being contained when the hobgoblins taking part within it betrayed their other green-skinned kin. Those that seek to utilise this dark and chaotic magic are known as the Demon Smiths, with those of particular import ascending to the status of Sorcerer Prophet. One thing to note is that the use of this magic comes with a horrific price. Dwarves were not designed to wield magical energies, and as such, those that harness the winds of magic slowly turn to stone from the feet up. Trade between factions such as the Chaos Dwarfs and others is rare. However, the Ogre Kingdoms, specifically the Ironskin tribe, would prove to be an unlikely trade partner. The Ogres desired the Chaos Dwarves' weaponry, and in return would supply manpower for the forges, furnaces and mines. A lesser known fact is that the Noblars came to find the Ogre Kingdoms after fleeing to avoid the enslavement of the Chaos Dwarves, with the Noblars saying that they absolutely terrified them. To pair with the race's fascination in foul magics is their incredible affinity for technological improvement, with no constraints placed upon them like those within the Western Kingdoms. The race has developed steam-powered technology unlike anything that has ever been seen before. Chaos Dwarf smiths are unafraid to mix their craft with foul magic to create arcane machines capable of immense destruction. You would assume with such incredible power within their arsenal that the Chaos Dwarves would be bent on world domination. However, they are not an expansionist race. The resources that they require can be found within their realms, with the wars that are waged generally revolving around the acquisition of more slaves to bolster their workforce. The Chaos Dwarf religion is based on the dark god that saved them during their time of plight. The Chaos God bearing the title of the Father of Darkness. HASHUT is a bull-shaped idol which is praised by these foul dwarves. The god demands blood sacrifices to be appeased and is regularly praised by Chaos Dwarf sorcerer prophets, which stand on the summit of grand temples raised in his name. In the Grand Temple of HASHUT in Zar-Nagrund, the leaders have developed a particularly horrifying way of offering praise to their lord. The victims would be herded into the hollowed belly of a grand bronze statue of HASHUT, with fires then being lit underneath its belly. As the victims would burn and their flesh would slough from their bones, their screams would funnel into the throat of the statue. These screams would reverberate into sounds akin to that of a braying bull, and it was said that the louder the braying, the more pleased their dark lord would be with the offering. This led to the statues being filled to the brim with offerings for their god. As HASHUT has taken the image of a bull, those that bear this figure are said to be sacred to the Chaos Dwarves. Unfortunately, the Chaos Dwarves haven't made their way into Age of Sigmar as a major faction just yet, although it could be argued that they did find their way onto the tabletop as part of the Legion of Axor, although this was a Forge World exclusive army, and was rather expensive for an army that performed poorly on the tabletop. We've also found lone Chaos Dwarves that have found their way into the Warcry setting, one as part of the Iron Golems. Within the lore, the faction has been mentioned in various settings, and it can only be assumed that during the Age of Chaos, as the Dwarven holds fell to chaos, some of these may have been influenced by the dark whispers of a foul god, or perhaps it was a lodge of fire slayers that fell to chaos. Either way, we do know for sure that they do exist within the setting. It has been confirmed that there are dark dwarves that worship an ancient figure known as HASHUT. with this information coming from the lackeys of the Cruel Boys, known as the Hobgrots. Further to this, we also know that the Chaos Dwarfs run the forges of Archaon the Everchosen, these forges creating his weapons and war machines, with perhaps the most recent reference to them being in the newly released Ossiarch Bone Reaper's Battle Tome, a map which details the lands of Shyesh, which notes a fortress that is held by the dark and evil dwarves, and has been marked for destruction by the Bone Reapers. One thing to note is that the fortress doesn't sit on the land, but on the sea. This was first seen within the 2nd edition rulebook, but with its confirmation in the Ossiarch book, it only seems as a matter of time until we see the Chaos Dwarves within Age of Sigmar. What do you think about the Chaos Dwarves? Do you think they'll make their way into the Age of Sigmar as a fully fleshed out faction, or will they just continue to be teased seemingly as always? I think with the introduction of the Squats, or the Leagues of Votann as they're named, back into 40k, and the recent Total War DLC, these little fellas making their way back into lore and tabletop only seems a matter of time. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. Cheers!